The film opens in the lavish home of Harlan Thrombey, a successful mystery author. When his housekeeper, Fran, arrives with a meal, she is horrified to discover Harlan lifeless, his throat cut. A week later, Harlan's nurse, Marta Cabrera, receives a call from his youngest son, Walt Thrombey. He informs her that the police plan to question all family members and close associates regarding Harlan's death. Upon arrival, the police start their questioning with Harlan's eldest daughter, Linda Drysdale. The interrogation team includes Trooper Wagner, Detective Lieutenant Elliott, and the enigmatic private investigator Benoit Blanc, who has been hired anonymously to delve into the case. They proceed to question Linda's husband, Richard Drysdale, followed by Walt, then Joni Thrombey, the widow of Harlan's late son Neil, and finally, Meg Thrombey, Joni's daughter. Everyone undergoes questioning in 2 rounds, the first conducted by Elliott and the second by Blanc. The question uncovers the timeline surrounding Harlan's alleged death during his 85th birthday celebration, where he had gathered his entire family at his mansion in Massachusetts. However, Blanc deduces from the interrogation that Harlan's connections with his family members were quite tense. On the day he died, Harlan had threatened to reveal Richard's infidelity with Linda. This suspicion is further supported by evidence Blanc uncovers after speaking with Marta, who has a unique condition that causes her to vomit if she lies. Consequently, Richard emerges as the primary suspect. Joni's admission reveals that Harlan had cut off her financial support due to her theft, positioning her as the second suspect. Additionally, Harlan had a heated dispute with Walt, which resulted in Walt being fired from his publishing firm, making him the third suspect. Finally, the last suspect is Ransom Drysdale, the son of Linda and Richard, who also had a confrontation with Harlan that fateful night. All of Blanc's accusations are then compared to the timeline previously established by Elliott. After the birthday celebration concluded, Marta guided Harlan to his room upstairs. Joni, who was meditating in her own space, was abruptly disturbed by a noise coming from above. She went to check on Harlan, discovering that it was merely the sound of his geoboard falling to the floor. In another part of the house, Richard was sound asleep, while Linda struggled to find rest. When Marta returned home late at night, she found Walt smoking outside with his son, Jacob, on the porch. Shortly after, Walt noticed Harlan descending the stairs and yelled at him to return to his room. Meanwhile, Ransom was absent from the house, having left early during the party following a disagreement with Harlan. This timeline undermines the accusations against everyone involved, leading Elliott to conclude that Harlan's death was a suicide. Nevertheless, the investigation into Marta continues. She elaborates on the events that transpired in Harlan's room after the party. Unbeknownst to Blanc, Marta inadvertently mixed up Harlan's medications, leading her to believe she had overdosed him with morphine. In a panic, she searched for the antidote but couldn't locate it. Due to her oversight, Harlan had only a few minutes left to live. When she attempted to call for an ambulance, Harlan unexpectedly stopped her, stating that her efforts would be futile. Marta was determined to seek help elsewhere, but as she moved, her foot caught on Harlan's, causing her to stumble and fall. This fall was the very sound Joni had heard earlier. Aware of Marta's mother's undocumented status, Harlan aimed to protect her family from scrutiny by advising Marta to fabricate an alibi that could shield her from murder charges. According to Elliott's timeline, Marta returned home late at night in her car. After exiting the vehicle, she parked it in a spot out of sight from the surveillance cameras. She then dashed back into the house and climbed up to Harlan's room using a side trellis, one of which she inadvertently damaged. Entering through a window, Marta donned Harlan's robe and cap before heading downstairs, revealing herself as the person Walt had spotted earlier. She exited the house via the side trellis, but Harlan's elderly mother mistakenly identified her as Ransom due to her fading memory. Marta eventually managed to recount her version of events to Blanc without losing her composure, leading him to believe she was being truthful. However, she omitted the part about her mistake in mixing up Harlan's medications. Soon after, Marta agreed to help Blanc with his investigation, taking steps to hide evidence of her actions as they searched the property. This included destroying surveillance footage, altering her footprints in Harlan's yard, and disposing of the broken trellis from that night. While Marta and Blanc continued their investigation in Harlan's room, They were interrupted by the unwelcome arrival of Ransom, who was met with hostility from Harlan's dog. Before Harlan's will was read, the entire family gathered in the living room, where Jacob, who had been in the bathroom for an extended period that night, provided a new clue. The bathroom is adjacent to Harlan's, and Jacob overhears a heated argument between Harlan and Ransom. He catches snippets of their conversation, specifically Harlan mentioning his will and Ransom making threats towards his grandfather. Ransom ultimately reveals that Harlan intended to exclude him from the will, igniting turmoil among them. Meanwhile, Blanc and Marta exit the house and stumble upon one of Harlan's dogs unexpectedly carrying the broken trellis that Marta had discarded. They quickly head back upstairs to further investigate the trick hall window, hoping to uncover new evidence. When Harlan's will is read, everyone is taken aback to learn that Marta is the sole heir. The family members who once treated her kindly now turn against her, hurling curses in her direction. Just as the entire family descends upon her, Ransom intervenes, helping her escape their fury. He takes her to a restaurant, but it soon becomes clear that Ransom is manipulating her into confessing, knowing that Marta is incapable of lying. In the end, he proposes to assist her in exchange for a portion of the inheritance. Meanwhile, the rest of the Thrombies attempt to convince Marta to forfeit her claim to the inheritance. As news of Marta inheriting Harlan's fortune spreads, crowds gather outside her home. Fran reveals she possesses a copy of Harlan's toxicology report, but her state prevents her from elaborating. Marta quickly administers CPR and calls for an ambulance. At the hospital, she finally opens up to Blanc about the events of that night. To her surprise, Blanc mentions that Ransom has just updated Elliot on the actual sequence of events. Additionally, Marta resolves to inform the family that she was responsible for Harlan's death, which would nullify the will under the Slayer rule. Back at Harlan's residence, Marta discovers a complete copy of the toxicology report hidden in Fran's cannabis stash. She hands it over to Blanc without glancing at it herself. As Blanc reviews the document, he notices a trace of morphine in Harlan's system, prompting him to cut Marta off before she can reveal the truth to the family. In a separate room, Blanc shares his insights. He explains that on the night of Harlan's birthday celebration, Ransom found out that his grandfather intended to leave everything to Marta, a situation he couldn't bear. Consequently, he left the party early to sneak into Harlan's room through a hidden window. While the festivities continued downstairs, he stealthily switched the contents of Harlan's medication vials and took the antidote, ensuring that Marta would inadvertently cause Harlan's death and thus forfeit her claim to the inheritance. Later, Harlan's mother discovered him while he was trying to escape through the side trellis. It was also uncovered that Marta had actually administered the correct medication to Harlan, instinctively recognizing it by its texture, showcasing her skills as a nurse. She mistakenly believed she had poisoned him after glancing at the label. Additionally, when Harlan's death was labeled a suicide, Ransom secretly hired Blanc to expose Marta. To further his scheme, Ransom returned to Harlan's house while everyone was attending the funeral. Unexpectedly, Fran caught him tampering with the crime scene and sent him a blackmail note along with Harlan's toxicology report, which he had obtained from her cousin at the medical examiner's office. Upon realizing that Marta wasn't to blame for Harlan's death, yet knowing that she still believed she was, Ransom forwarded the blackmail note to her and set fire to the medical examiner's office to eliminate evidence of her innocence. At their meeting point, Ransom met Fran and intentionally overdosed her with morphine before emailing Marta about the location. All of this was part of his plan to frame Marta with Fran's body. After listening to Blanc's analysis, Ransom remained confident, thinking there wasn't enough evidence to arrest him. The only hope now rested on Fran, who was in the hospital. Soon after, Marta received a call informing her of Fran's condition. She learned that Fran had survived and would implicate Ransom. In a fit of desperation, Ransom confessed to all his actions as per Blanc's analysis, vowing revenge while glaring at Marta. However, Marta suddenly vomited on him, exposing the truth. Fran was actually dead, and Ransom had made all his confessions, which were recorded by the police. Furious, he lunged at Marta with a knife from Harlan's collection, only to find it was a retractable stage knife. 1. After recording Ransom's confession to the murder and witnessing his attempt on Marta's life, the police finally take him into custody. Blanc reveals to Marta that he suspected her involvement in Harlan's death when he noticed a tiny bloodstain on her shoe. Meanwhile, Linda discovers a hidden note from Harlan, revealing her husband's infidelity. As Ransom is led away by the authorities, Marta observes the entire family from the balcony of her mansion.